This time on Goss's Garage, we're going to talk a little bit about serpentine belts. Back in the day, you used to have a different belt for each one of the accessories on the engine. You may have a power steering belt, you had an air conditioning belt, and so on. Well, serpentine belts are wider and they go around everything, and they typically use one belt to drive all of the accessories on the car. Like this one would drive the water pump, the alternator, and the power steering, and so on. Well, lots of folks seem to think that all they ever have to do is to replace the belt itself. And even that they procrastinate about, sometimes for years. But the reality is there's a lot more going on in here than just the belt itself. Well, let's take a look at what we have. Here we have what is represented as power steering, over here as alternator, here as water pump. Now all of these are parts that have bearings inside them that you don't replace or do anything with until the item fails. In other words, the power steering pump fails, you get a new pump. You don't just replace a bearing in it. Same with the water pump, same with the alternator, and so on. But then down here, we have this piece right here. This is a tensioner. This has a big spring in here, and that spring pushes against the belt to keep the belt tight. And over here, we have an idler pulley. Well, the idler pulley, what it does is it just simply keeps the belt in the right position. It doesn't put any pressure on it or anything like that. It just keeps it so that it rides true with the other pulleys on the front of the engine. All right, now, what do you need to look at here? Well, each one of these idlers or tensioners or anything like that, it has a bearing inside it. These are ball bearings in most cases, and they wear out. Just like the belt wears out, so do the bearings in these things. Now, what you want to consider is that by the time the belt is worn out, is it likely that you will keep the car through another belt, or that you'll be able to get the mileage out of one of these bearings that you would with a second belt? Well, chances are no. So you want to check these very carefully while the belt is off. And the way you check them is simply on the vehicle, you spin them and see if they make any kind of noise, and then you spin them by hand very easily and see if you can feel any roughness in them. All right, so you spin them first, just spin them hard, and they should coast, and if they rattle or anything, then it needs to be replaced. Some of them you can actually replace the bearing in, but typically you replace the whole pulley assembly. Now, if you don't do that, what's likely to happen? Well, we might have something that winds up like what we see over here. This one is all chewed up where it's seized up, or one of its companions seized up, and the plastic of the pulley itself is melted. Here's a real example of that. Came from the same car. The plastic of the pulley seized, the bearing in it went bad, and the belt just kept spinning on it, and it literally melted everything in there. Tore the belt up and a lot of other things along with it. So what would have been a minor repair, just to put a new pulley on it, wound up being a major repair. Now here's the thing that puzzles me. This person had been told that that bearing was failing, and they drove it for another year with it making noise and doing all kinds of goofy things. And then they continued to drive it after the belt started screeching like crazy as it was sliding on that pulley after it had seized up, to the point that it burned the belt in two, and it burned up all of that plastic on the pulley. All right, well, the answer to that was, well, I took it to a shop, and the shop couldn't find out what was wrong. Well, hey, what kind of a technician doesn't know how to figure out something like that? You can do it yourself, as a matter of fact. Here we have something, you can listen to these things. You can buy a stethoscope like this at the auto parts store. They're typically 20 bucks or so for a decent one, and you can listen with the engine running. Of course, you have to be very careful. You just put this on the surface of the bearing, not the part that's moving, on the bolt in the center, and listen. But maybe you don't want to spend even that much money. Well, here's something you can do. You take a long, skinny screwdriver like this, put it against the center of the pulley, the bolt in the center, and then you put your thumb like this and put it in your ear. And you'll be shocked at how much you can hear by doing something like that. Of course, the way we do it in the shop is with something like this. This is an electronic stethoscope, very precise. Probably not something you would want to do. A little bit on the expensive side because you wouldn't use it that much. But here's something else you can do. And this works for all kinds of things on cars. You got a noise, you can't figure out where it's coming from. Take a piece of heater hose or garden hose like this. Put one end of it up where you think the noise is coming from. Hold the other end to your ear. And again, you'll be able to hear the noise just as plain as day. And you can tell by listening to companion parts and so on which one is bad. So these are some inexpensive tools that you can make yourself or you can buy for next to nothing that will help you diagnose these various noises that you hear under the hood of the car when the engine is running. Have to be careful with them, got to use them right, but it can save you a lot of grief and a lot of money. And if you have a question or a comment, how about dropping me a line right here at radio@goss-garage.com.